Hello and a very warm welcome indeed to this latest edition of Quadriga, coming to you from the heart of the German capital, Berlin. And this week we're talking about developments in Turkey amid growing fears that President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is creating a one-man state. Now, this week, German Chancellor Angela Merkel has been in Istanbul, expressing what she called her deep concern about Turkey's commitment to democracy. Meanwhile, Germany and the rest of Europe are increasingly dependent on President Erdogan as a tense standoff continues between the EU and Turkey over a crucial deal to reduce the flow of migrants to Europe, a deal that the Turkish leader has now threatened to scrap. Well, our topic this week on Quadriga is Erdogan, our friend, the autocrat, with a big question mark. And to discuss that question, I'm joined here in the studio by three excellent observers and analysts. Let me introduce them to you, beginning with Maximilian Popp, who is a Turkey expert from Spiegel magazine, who says the refugee deal between the EU and Turkey is wrong. It strips refugees of their rights and puts human lives at risk. Also with us is Andreas Kloot of The Economist, who believes that the only thing worse than sticking to the refugee deal with Turkey is not sticking to that deal. And a big welcome to Dea Akal. She's a Turkish journalist who works for various media outlets, including DW. And she says Erdogan is in a process of power centralization, but backing away from democracy will only deepen Turkey's problems and isolation. Well, I'd like to begin with you, and I'd like to begin with Angela Merkel's visit earlier this week to Istanbul, where she expressed, as she put it, her deep concern about Turkey's commitment to democracy. She also spoke with members of civil society in Turkey, in Istanbul. And I wonder what impact those kind of initiatives have in Turkey. Is anybody listening?
Actually, I've seen almost no article on Merkel's meeting with the civil society. Today, there was an article...
Is that because of censorship?
I guess Turkish press wasn't really invited to the press conference.
So they ignored it. They chose to ignore it.
So it was, I guess, she wanted to give the message to the German media. But a colleague of ours wrote an article today where, obviously, Merkel said in the meeting that it's not up to her to fight for more democracy in Turkey, that it's the duty of the Turkish people to do that. It was quoted as such, but of course it's important, and it was expected from the pro-EU circles in Turkey that the EU or EU politicians would do something to support them. But it's true, it's not Merkel who's going to, change Turkish politics. But I think it was discussed at that meeting, and it was welcomed that she at least met civil society members.
What do you say about that, Maximilian? Should Angela Merkel be intervening in Turkish politics? I mean, people here get very angry when Recep Tayyip Erdogan intervenes in German domestic politics.
I think it wouldn't help the Turks much. I also agree that intervention from a German chancellor wouldn't really change the human rights situation in Turkey much. No intervention didn't make it better in the past neither, so that's a tricky issue. She mostly has to do it for the people in her own country, here in Germany, because you feel more and more people, you see more and more people getting uncomfortable with Merkel being so quiet about human rights violation in Turkey, and with her new and strong partnership with Recep Tayyip Erdogan.
But when people feel that kind of discomfort, that is because German politicians, a lot of German politicians across the board, have recently been saying that Mr. Erdogan has autocratic ambitions, as it's been put. Do you share that view? Is he an autocrat in the making?
I think he is. There are tendencies, definitely, but I feel always a bit uncomfortable myself about the discomfort of the people when we speak about Turkey. We care so much about, like, the way Merkel talks to Erdogan. We talk so much about the question if Merkel is in the hands of Erdogan. What we talk far too little is about the situation of the refugees there and the consequences the deal has for refugees.
So double standards on the German side?
I think so, yeah.
Talking, Andreas, let's just bring in Andreas Kloot. When we talk about President Erdogan, people do in Germany tend to act as though he's a despot, a fully fledged despot, or at least a despot in the making. What's his perspective on all this, do you imagine? Mr. Erdogan's perspective?
I think Erdogan is a man of tremendous vanity in that sense, and in a few other senses he reminds me of Vladimir Putin, but also of other characters even in German domestic politics. And I think he's viewed his relationship, if you say his view on us in Germany, where we happen to be, over the past year, as I think he felt hurt, humiliated in his vanity. And like a child almost, psychologically, that's how I view him in some cases, as Putin as well. I think he felt rejected and is almost feeling that it's up to him to show his Turks and himself that he can take revenge. Specifically, what I'm talking about is when Angela Merkel became Chancellor, so about a decade ago. At that time, she, in contrast to her predecessor, gave Turkey the cold shoulder that came from within her party, but in rejecting their ambition to join the EU. And at that point, if I'm correct, Erdogan was not yet this neo-Ottoman autocrat wannabe that he is today. But he felt so stiffed by her that, and probably, you know, he lost face, that he says, I think he holds a grudge. It's part of the explanation is probably as simple as that.
So we're talking about today about Recep Tayyip Erdogan, whether he is a good friend, a friend of Germany's, whether he should be a friend of Germany's, whether we should be engaging in the refugee deal with Turkey at this point in time. What do you make of that analysis, dear?
I think I agree. Erdogan, actually, when you look at Turkey's history with the EU, when the reform process started actually in 1999, there was a consensus in Turkey between different political groups, ideologies. The EU was a common goal. So you had less dispute, and Erdogan came into power during that period, and they all agreed on the common goal. But when Merkel and Chirac also showed, you know, it was a huge mistake by Merkel, I guess, when we look at that period now.
To shun Turkey.
Yeah, it was. I don't think that Erdogan forgives her. We know that he feels betrayed. He's disappointed and he doesn't trust Merkel. And we can also see that Merkel knows it because of the statements she makes lately, because she always underlines some words, you know, deep discussions based on confidence. When you elaborate on a word, that means there's a lack of confidence. So she's trying to explain Erdogan that she's open to discussion.
When we talk about the whole thing about Turkish membership of the EU, though, I just wonder, Maximilian, I was reading a German critic recently who was saying Turkey is pretending that it wants to be a member, but it doesn't really. The EU is pretending that it wants Turkey in, but it doesn't really. Is that a fair analysis?
Very, very precise description of what's going on, exactly. And it's a pity, and it's a drama that we ended up like this.
It's an incredible mess.
It's as both of you said, and it's a missed chance. And I think it will be, if we look back to these days in like 20 years, I think the decision of Merkel in 2005, 2006, at the beginning of her chancellorship, to turn away from Turkey, to only speak about this privileged partnership, yeah. I think we will remember it as one of the crucial foreign policy mistakes of her chancellorship.
OK, Andreas is nodding. Let's go back to Turkey itself. And one thing that is clear about Turkey at this point in time is that the country's opposition is coming under massive pressure from President Erdogan, very much a man with a mission who is tightening his stranglehold on power.
The presidential system is not a personal request from Recep Tayyip Erdogan. On the contrary, it's a response to the situation that Turkey currently finds itself in. Turkey urgently needs both a presidential system and a new constitution.
And anyone who doesn't agree is going to pay the price. When ousted Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoglu grew too independent, Erdogan showed him the door and replaced him with a more loyal lieutenant, Binali Yildirim. And he's also taken a hard line with the opposition. MPs from the pro-Kurdish HDP party have been stripped of their parliamentary immunity. Erdogan views all Kurdish politicians as terrorists. And the Turkish press is forced to remain silent. Contrary media providers are taken over by the government, and critical journalists end up in court. Is Turkey on the road to dictatorship?
Andreas Kludt, it's a question we have to talk about. We've talked about it here. I mean, you've been on the show here often enough where we've reflected on this. Yeah, you know, the question really is now, is he moving towards becoming a dictator?
I think he is. Moving towards doesn't mean he's fully there, but, you know, the word dictator comes from ancient Rome, Republican Rome. I recently wrote a little sort of tongue-in-cheek, a little essay on how populism, which is also originated in Republican Rome, produces little Caesars or Caesarism. And of course, he is one of the people that we see a lot of, even in America. Trump would like to be a little Caesar if he could. Doesn't mean the Republic will let him. But I mentioned Putin, we could say Orban. I think it is part of a trend. After his perceived rejection, he decided, like Putin, to turn away from the West that just rejected him and to build a neo-Ottoman to regain a certain standing that he feels the country lost and he lost. And everything and the path he sees, again, as Putin, is to remove opponents, to intimidate or bully those who disagree so that he has more and more power. And that has always in history just meant you're trying to become a dictator. The question is how far his society will let him become.
Sure. Maximilian, when we talk about removing opponents, Ahmet Davutoglu, the Prime Minister, was recently forced to resign, yeah? You're a Turkey expert. Tell me what that tells us about Turkey, about Mr. Erdogan.
Nothing good, I fear, because the performance of Davutoglu actually was not that bad.
He's a loyalist.
He's a loyalist. He has been a loyalist all the time.
But he had become too prominent. What's the problem?
Yeah, I guess that was the reason, and maybe too successful. I mean, it was interesting enough. It was like right after the EU announced that the visa liberalization is on track, that he was removed. This was like the biggest success in his maybe whole foreign policy career. Yeah. And then just a few hours after that, he's out. And that shows that there is no place in Turkish politics for a second man next to Mr. Erdogan.
OK, so truly perhaps a one-man state in the making or already in place. There was an interesting day at the beginning of that short report that we've just seen. There was an interesting statement from President Erdogan saying that the situation in which Turkey currently finds itself demands the installation of a presidential system. When he talks about the situation that Turkey currently finds itself in, what might he be talking about? It sounds like paranoia.
He usually talks about he talks about terror threats. He talks a lot about terror. He talks about, it's really well known, EU bashing, Western bashing. It's the rhetoric. It's a populist rhetoric that we know, and he uses it and it works out. You talk with people in Turkey, you ask questions, and you see they're afraid. From whom? Yeah, the Westerners. They don't want us to live peacefully in this country. They support terror. It goes on like this, and I don't think that it doesn't only count what Erdogan says. It counts what the party members communicate to their friends, to their families. There is a fear in the society that Turkey is left alone. Yes, Turkey is left alone and is isolated, which is true, but...
And lots of Turkish intellectuals have been calling on Western, on Europe and Western countries to actually send a signal to Turkey. Where would your red lines be? When is enough enough?
Question goes to me.
Go on then, Maximilian.
I think that the red line has been crossed much earlier, even before the refugee deal. I mean, the developments since Gezi maybe are just super disturbing. I mean, I don't know what it would help to officially announce a red line. I mean, we saw what that meant in Syria when Obama was declaring red lines. I don't know how much red lines help in politics. I just think that, as we said before, the troubling thing is that for Europe, the tools to intervene in Turkey, to put pressure on the Turkish government, are very little, and that's why they are in a position where they can only watch, and that's.
I agree, and I think that talk about red lines in this context is naive, because red line and then what? What would you propose the West do? Turkey he has already turned himself from the West. He finds himself in a difficult neighborhood. What is he trying to do? I find it quite short-sighted. I think he's driven, like Putin again, a lot by psychology more than strategic thinking. Where exactly is he trying to take Turkey in the next decade or so? I think he would like, if he could, to become a neo-Ottoman leader of the Sunni world and play a larger role that way. But if you look at the region, he's picking fights with everyone, including shooting down a Russian jet the other day. In order to become the powerful person he wants to be, he has to find allies somewhere. He's not doing that right now. So I see there is a limit to his ambition at some point, just because he's not being very smart about it.
Turkey very isolated at this point in time. Lost a lot of friends in recent years, you would have to say.
All of them. Is there any friend left?
I don't know whether Erdogan has any dialogue with any other leader than Merkel.
That is the ironic point. And
I think you've mentioned it as well. What is the alternative? What would happen after, if you would define red lines? I don't think that's a solution to anything. I've read an article on EU's policy related to Russia, and Mogherini was elaborating on the fact that it's a selective engagement. And when you look at it, what's going on between Turkey and EU, it's actually selective engagement. To be realistic, Turkey and the EU are cooperating on fields where they have common interests and nothing else. I think the EU doesn't do anything, it's the same thing with Russia. And EU
same thing with Iran.
Yeah,
That's what we do with everyone. What else would one do?
Okay, but what we do know is we are doing business with Turkey at this point in time. The refugee deal between the EU and Turkey that we've already mentioned. Maximilian, you've called it a farce. Why?
Yeah, and exactly because of that. That's what we are doing. We are doing dirty deals with people. The problem here is the refugees have to pay the price in the end. The highest price will be paid or is paid already by the refugees.
Why?
And I think
why?
And that's even more the fault of the Europeans than of Turkey, and I'll explain you why. It was promised and it was promoted, the deal was promised and promoted as something that would create an alternative to illegal migration. So the refugees wouldn't have to step on the boats anymore and cross the Aegean. They would have a legal way to reach Europe, and this is not the case. And as long as this is not the case, the whole thing is a farce. So far, there have been a few hundred people resettled from Turkey to the EU, and already there is trouble. It seems like this is already the maximum number we can reach. This is not a credible, realistic alternative to illegal migration. And that means what the deal right now is just outsourcing the responsibility for refugees to another country. Europe has done that in the past very often with Gaddafi in Libya. They're now doing it with Bashir in Sudan, so they don't have much hesitation there. And they are repeating the same thing with Turkey, and that's why I think it's a farce. Okay, resonant words. Meanwhile, we're listening to what Maximilian has to say. The German government in recent weeks has been arguing that there's absolutely no alternative to the refugee deal. Is that really true?
NATO and the EU's external border agency Frontex are patrolling the eastern Mediterranean heavily, making life a lot tougher for traffickers. The Balkan route is closed. Fences are a physical and psychological deterrent. And the EU is also considering plans to give the majority of funds earmarked for Turkey to Greece instead. That could help the Greek government finally set up a functioning infrastructure to provide adequately for the influx of migrants. Asylum applications could be processed at these new hotspots, and applicants who are turned down could be returned directly to their home countries from Greece. Does the EU still need a refugee deal with Turkey?
Good question. The one we've got in the making, Maximilian says the deal is a farce. Meanwhile, Andreas Klute, at the top of the show, I quoted you as saying the only thing worse than sticking to the refugee deal with Turkey is not sticking to it. So explain.
Well, first of all, I liked what Maximilian said in terms, at heart, the deal we have does represent outsourcing the problem to that country just outside our Schengen borders.
Putting it out of sight and out of mind.
Yes. Yeah. However, what is the alternative? The alternative, and I think Merkel knew this, to insource it to one member or perhaps others of the European Union, which is already having a different crisis, and that would be Greece. And I think she saw that, I mean, her domestic pressure, she got herself out of that for the time being because of something that she officially did not want, which was the solution that the Balkan states with Austria simply shut their borders. I think that dried up the refugee flows as much as everything else. But there was a specter that they would all congregate on Greece and that we would have essentially Lesbos and Kos, 2 islands that would become huge refugee camps. That would not be good for the refugees either. So faced with that, she said, well, what is the next best option in this real world of bad options?
Okay.
And the only way she had, the only thing she had was to do a deal with Turkey.
I understand this argumentation. I still don't share it. And I think I'm a bit troubled by the fact that we accepted so much the saying that there are only 2 options. One is the Viktor Orban Europe of fences, and the other is the EU-Turkey deal. There is a 3rd option, and that means follow our laws. I mean, the European Constitution, the German Constitution, they clearly state that refugees have the right to apply for asylum within Europe. So please, let's go back to this. Let's work on a 3rd way. Let's work on an alternative and not accept these 2 given solutions as solutions. There must be another one.
Just one thing on that. The law is a problem here because the existing law, which the law is an ass, as the famous quote says, but is that you can apply in Europe, but you apply in the first country you get to. So if you enforce the law,
right,
you still return the problem to the countries that are already in crisis.
Well, that's the Dublin regulation, which the EU would have to work on. Obviously, the system has to be changed, but it cannot be changed in a way that it means no more refugees in Europe. That's just denying any responsibility.
Yeah. It's a big question, this refugee crisis, the refugee deal. What's the alternative? What's the best way to go now to move forward?
I don't think that there's an alternative. If this deal fails, it would have tremendous consequences on Turkey-Germany relations, Turkey-EU relations, but also Turkey would even get more unpredictable than it is right now. And I fear the consequences. I don't think that there's an alternative right now, but I agree that there should be alternatives respecting human rights, respecting refugee rights. But when we look at it at a bilateral level between Turkey and Germany and the EU, it will somehow work with a little bit changes, I guess. That's what they talk in diplomatic circles, that they will wait until October for the visa liberalization. Both sides have accepted it. But we will hear, Erdogan will put forward his own interests. He will put his own interests over the interests of his people. Merkel will do the same with, her political ambitions, their elections next year. She will focus and elaborate on her interests, and we will watch a very tense negotiations, because they will talk, they will continue to talk, but the tension will remain.
The tension will increase, in fact. On June 2nd, we have a very fun exercise here, interesting timing of it. The Bundestag will vote to call the genocide 100 years ago in Armenia a genocide.
Yeah.
He will blow a fuse, he will jump up and down, and it will all get worse throughout the summer. It's very unpredictable. For me, the interesting question is, let's say he does scupper the deal and say, to hell with it, I'm not interested anymore. What will the refugees do then? Because, of course, they go where they expect success. What will their next route be? And there are many, many options being discussed. Everyone's looking for that. That's what's going to make the summer unstable.
OK. Some sober analysis from Dea. We've got Mr. Erdogan blowing a fuse here. Maximilian, I'd like to come back to you. Is Mr. Erdogan an autocrat? First question, because that's the question we've set for ourselves today in this debate.
The way he governs the country is autocratic, yeah.
OK, should we be doing business with him, yes or no?
In general, yes, we should discuss. We do discuss with autocrats. I have no problem with that. But we have to set up a deal that guarantees the rights to refugees, and this is not the case. That's why it's a bad deal.
OK. And give me your vision for, or your idea of where German-Turkish relations are likely to go in the next couple of years, given that there's, there are so many people here in Germany, obviously, so many very good people who have their roots in Turkey.
Yeah, this is one of the dramas we don't talk about much right now, and that's why I agree that the deal fails, the consequences will be bad, and also because of that, because I think this is one of the last chances those not two countries, I mean, it's the EU then, but like also like for German-Turkish relations, they have. And if this fails, I think it will, like, the mistrust will be even bigger, and I think dark times ahead.
Dark times ahead, perhaps, from Maximilian. Thank you, Dea. Thank you, Maximilian. Thank you, Andreas. Hope we've given you plenty of food for thought on relations between Germany and Turkey. If you've enjoyed the show as much as I have, come back next week. Bye-bye and tschüss.